I'm Avon. My parents once called me a mistake, right in the middle of a family dinner. And when I poured my soul into building something of my own, they laughed, mocked my project, said I was just chasing a fantasy, but behind my back, they used my ideas. They stole my work. They erased me, like I was never there to begin with. And just when I thought they couldn't go lower, they locked me out of my job, cut off my team, and framed me for fraud. So what did I do? Well, let's just say they forgot who really funded everything they built. They say you can't choose your family, but I've learned you can outgrow them. It was a Sunday evening in early March when my parents invited me to dinner at the house. Not unusual, but the tone was off. The email from my mother read more like a meeting memo than a family gathering. Sunday, 6:30 p.m. Formal attire. Important to discuss recent transitions. Transitions, my ass. I knew what it was. Another staged performance for Callan's next title bump. Their estate sat in one of those manicured neighborhoods in Charlotte, where the trees looked like they were planted by architects. Cold, controlled. Just like everything else Lucian and Celeste ever touched. I walked into the dining room, heels clicking on imported marble. The same heavy chandelier hung above that ridiculous mahogany table where I'd spent half my life trying to earn praise that never came. Callan was already seated, collar open, wine in hand, smirking like the world owed him for showing up. Dinner began with small talk, forced smiles, forks clinking against plates. I waited, measured each breath. I'd rehearsed my words so many times. When Lucian finally paused to pour himself another glass of red, I looked up. "Dad," I said, "I think I've earned the right to ask. Why was I never considered for CEO?" Silence, not dramatic, just hollow. Lucian didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He swirled his wine, took a sip, and then looked at me like I was some intern who'd spoken out of turn. "Because you're not CEO material," he said flatly. "You were a mistake the moment your mother got pregnant." It didn't even sound cruel. It sounded rehearsed, like he'd been waiting to say it for years. Celeste didn't flinch. She just tilted her head slightly and said, "Sweetheart, you weren't part of the plan. You made everything complicated." I sat still, blinking, my spine straight, shoulders locked, every nerve on fire. I heard the words, but my brain refused to translate them. Then came the cherry on top. Callan let out a quiet chuckle, like it was all so obvious. "Come on, sis," he said, lifting his glass. "You know how this works. You're the smart one, but I'm the brand." Lucian nodded, pleased. "He gets it. Vision can't be taught, Avon. You've always been good with numbers, but leading people? No one wants to follow a lecture." Celeste chimed in, sipping her Sauvignon Blanc. "The board loves Callan's energy. Well, you can be intense. It's not always palatable." Intense. That word. The corporate way of saying too much, too loud, too ambitious, especially for a daughter. My eyes burned, but I didn't let them see me blink. The meal continued like nothing had happened. Lucian transitioned into talking about Callan's upcoming keynote at a national manufacturing summit. "He'll be presenting the Nova project," he said, smiling like a proud mentor. That stopped me cold. "The Nova project?" I asked. Lucian looked at me, then waved a dismissive hand. "Your brother's taking it forward. It needs a fresh voice. Yours is a little academic. He's going to be the face of innovation for us now." Academic. I built that project from scratch, designed the framework, researched the logistics, recruited the team. The only thing Callan contributed was a single buzzword he read off a Forbes headline. Synergy. I clenched my hands under the table, digging my nails into my palm just to keep from screaming. My parents sat there, sipping wine and rewriting reality. My brother, lazy, entitled, clueless, was about to present my life's work to a national stage, and I was being told to sit down and smile. "Don't take it personally, honey," Celeste said, with that smile she only used when she wanted to make someone feel small. Callan just connects better with people. You're brilliant, but brilliance can be isolating. God, I hated when she weaponized kindness. I didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. I just stared at the edge of my plate, listening to the click of silverware and the low hum of betrayal. They had made their decision long ago. This dinner was just a formality. I had been tolerated, not loved, used, not trusted, groomed to support, never to lead. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to win their approval. If I couldn't earn their respect as a daughter, I'd take it as an enemy. The next morning felt like fog. I got up before sunrise, restless and hollow, the echo of my father's words still bouncing in my chest. You were a mistake. I'd repeated it in my head at least 100 times since dinner, each time landing heavier. It didn't sting anymore. It carved. I wrapped my fingers around my coffee mug like it might hold me together and opened my inbox. 74 unread emails, but my eyes locked on the subject line at the top. From Celeste Murray. Subject: some gentle advice. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside, but I did anyway. Sometimes we women forget that being smart isn't the same as being wise. Wisdom is knowing when to step back. You've worked hard, Avon, but maybe it's time to let your brother lead. That's what your father expects. Love, Mom. There it was, laced with civility, soaked in poison. My mother didn't scream when she wanted to hurt you. She smiled and twisted the knife through etiquette. I didn't reply. I stared at the blinking cursor in the reply box for a full minute, then closed it. I knew what she was doing. Be wise meant stay quiet, and let him lead meant know your place. By 10 a.m., the company-wide video call had started. Lucian's face filled the conference monitors. He looked polished and overconfident, as always, like he was auditioning for a business documentary no one asked for. I'm thrilled to announce that our very own Callan Murray, he said, gesturing proudly to my brother seated beside him, has been the primary visionary behind our new initiative, Project Nova. His leadership and fresh thinking are exactly what Wallace Manufacturing needs in this new era. My heart didn't race. It slowed, as if even my body was stunned speechless. On screen, Callan was fumbling through slides I had created. My design, my research, my structure. He didn't even bother to rename the file. It still said avondraftfinal.pptx in the window corner. He mispronounced two key terms, glossed over the supply chain strategy, called a projected ROI just under 30%, when it was 42.7%, and no one questioned it. I glanced at the scrolling reactions in the chat. Brilliant! Excited to see where Callan takes this. What a bold move. Bold? It was theft, and they applauded like it was genius. I texted my assistant, Sarah. Do I even exist anymore? She didn't reply for a while. When she did, it was just, I'm so sorry. By mid-afternoon, a glossy PDF version of the internal newsletter dropped into everyone's inbox. I opened it without thinking. Headline: Callan Murray, visionary behind our new future. The article credited him as the architect of Nova. Described his natural instinct for innovation and trailblazing leadership. My name wasn't mentioned, not once. A few minutes later, another email arrived, from Celeste. No message, just the newsletter PDF and a smiley face emoji. I don't know what burned more, her silence or her smugness. Maybe both. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The room was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC. I should have felt rage or sadness or something. Instead, all I felt was vanishing. They weren't just ignoring me. They were rewriting the story without me. They were erasing me. I closed the email, pushed my chair back, and stood slowly, letting the silence settle around me like smoke. This isn't just favoritism, I said under my breath. It's a strategy. The words echoed in my head long after I'd whispered them, That strategy became impossible to ignore when I walked into the Monday morning leadership meeting 2 weeks later and saw my name gone from the strategic planning roster. Gone, like it had never been there. The screens displayed this quarter's initiatives, with names assigned to every project lead. My title, once third on the list, was nowhere. In my usual seat sat a junior associate from marketing, nervously tapping his pen against a notepad. He avoided my eyes like I was a ghost. I cleared my throat. "That's my seat." He looked up, startled. "Oh, I was told to, just sit here today." "By who?" He stammered. I'm not sure. I think Mr. Murail's assistant mentioned it." "Of course. Mr. Murail. Not Dad. Not even Latian. Just another cold function in a suit." I stood still for a moment, scanning the room. No one made eye contact. It was like I'd become invisible in the very space I had helped shape. I didn't argue, didn't demand. I simply turned around and walked out. Back at my desk, I tried to access the project files I'd been working on for 6 months. Password denied. Access revoked. Even the shared folders I'd created were now marked restricted. I reached out to the admin in IT, Travis. He was always nice, always quick to help. He replied with a single sentence. "I'm sorry, Avon. I was instructed to reroute your access." I can't say more. That phrase. I can't say more. It's what people say when they've been warned. By 7 p.m., I was still at my desk, jaw tight, scrolling mindlessly through archived emails. Then something strange happened. A message pinged my inbox. It wasn't addressed to me, but somehow I'd been copied by mistake. The subject line read, "Quarterly Executive Feedback, Avon Miri." I opened it. The review claimed I was combative in leadership scenarios, unreceptive to collaborative input, and emotionally unstable under pressure. The language was vague but sharp, designed to raise red flags without anything specific enough to fight back against. It even suggested I had strained relationships with upper-level leadership, as if I hadn't been deliberately isolated. The worst part, it was signed by an executive who hadn't worked with me directly in over 8 months. I felt sick. A performance review like this, if circulated to the board, could destroy my credibility. It was a quiet execution, no confrontation, no defense, just a subtle push out the back door with a smile. I sat there in silence. The building around me felt colder than usual. The hum of the vents, the faint clicking of someone typing across the hall, it all faded into static. They weren't just closing doors. They were painting me as dangerous, difficult, disposable. For a few minutes, I didn't move, just stared at the screen. Flashes of memory ran through my head, late nights rebuilding our logistics model, weekends sacrificed to fix operational breakdowns, every win they took credit for, every failure they pinned on me. I had thought I was part of the foundation. Turns out I was just convenient scaffolding, easy to remove once the picture looked polished enough for showtime. I didn't cry. My chest was tight, but dry. Instead, I opened a blank document. I started listing names, departments, patterns. I wasn't going to walk away confused. I was going to walk away knowing exactly who helped dig the hole they were trying to bury me in. I'd given this company more than a decade of my life, and now they were trying to erase me, hoping I'd fade without a fight. But I wasn't fading. I leaned back, stared into the empty corner of my office, the one I used to fill with project drafts and blueprints, and said aloud to no one, "You don't get to bury me, not without digging your own grave first." I didn't sleep much after that night. My body shut down, but my mind never stopped working, replaying every sign I'd ignored, every smile that was actually a smirk. They weren't just trying to cut me out. They wanted to eliminate me completely. By Thursday, things took a sharper turn. That morning, I tried to log into my company email from my laptop at home. Access denied. I refreshed. Tried again. Same message. Access restricted. Please contact your administrator. Strange. I grabbed my phone and attempted to open the cloud dashboard for Project NOVA. It had disappeared from my access list, so had every folder tied to my team, my deliverables, my files. I was locked out of everything I had built. All of it. I grabbed my blazer, keys, and badge and drove straight to the office. When I reached the turnstiles in the lobby, I tapped my badge. The light flashed red. I tried again. Another red light. The security guard shifted awkwardly behind the desk, pretending not to notice. I stepped aside and called Travis in IT. "Hey, Travis, I can't get into the building and—" His voice came through, hesitant. "Avon, I was told your access was temporarily paused, while roles are being restructured." "Paused? Who gave that order?" There was a silence on the line. "That's above my level. Sorry." Above his level, like everything else lately. I turned and walked right back out. By late afternoon, a knock at my door startled me. A small manila envelope sat on the welcome mat. No return label, no note. Inside was a printed copy of a vendor contract, Wallace Manufacturing, listed as the payer, nearly $4 million in retainer fees, approved under my name. Except I had never seen it before. My digital signature was at the bottom, dated 2 weeks earlier. The vendor's name was unfamiliar. So was the agency listed. And yet, the formatting, the legal header, looked authentic. I scanned the routing information. The contract had been pushed through by Callan. The approval chain showed him initiating the process, and then my name, my signature, on the final line. I felt the color drain from my face. He wasn't just climbing on my back anymore. He was framing me. This was beyond ambition. This was malicious. Within an hour, I was on the phone with someone I hadn't called in years. Carla, a former colleague turned compliance lawyer, now consulting out of Atlanta. She picked up on the second ring. "Avon? I need you to look at a contract," I said, my voice low. "I think someone forged my signature, and they're trying to make it look like I signed off on millions in payments." Her tone shifted instantly. "Email it. Now." I sent the file. 15 minutes later, she called back. "If this hits audit," she said, "it doesn't just look bad, it looks criminal. Whoever did this wants you liable for fraud." I sat still. My pulse was hammering, but my hands were steady. "If they want war," I said, "they'll get it. But it won't be on their terms." The next hour was a blur. I gathered everything I could: backups of emails, screenshots of access logs, notes, timelines. I packed my personal items from my home office into a sleek, hard-shelled case. I turned off my work phone for good. There was nothing left to talk about. The next morning, I walked into the office one last time. No one looked up as I passed. The walls felt narrower, the air sharper. A place I'd once felt ownership over now felt foreign, like I was trespassing in my own life. I walked straight to my desk, slid the drawer open, pulled out my flash drive and my leather-bound notebook, the one I never left to the cloud, and placed them in the case. No announcements, no goodbyes. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the steel door. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Calm, measured, but burning from the inside. I whispered to no one in particular. Time to disappear. Disappearing was easier than I expected. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't slam any doors. I just left everything untouched. My desk, my nameplate, even the framed photo of a younger me at a product launch ribbon cutting, back when I still believed legacy meant something. By Monday, my calendar was blank. No one could reach me, no messages, no out-of-office reply. I became a ghost in a building I helped build. The whispers started almost immediately. Did she resign? Maybe she had a breakdown. I heard she got escorted out by legal. Let them guess. Let them spin whatever narrative helped them sleep at night. Meanwhile, I was sitting cross-legged in the center of my condo, laptop open, sleeves rolled up, coffee gone cold on the table. The blinds were shut. Every light was off, except for the soft glow of my screens. My private home office had been silent for months, but now it pulsed with purpose. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't crying. I was working. First, I accessed the backup drive I'd kept off-site. contingencies I hoped I'd never need. Then, I contacted my forensic accounting team, people I'd quietly kept on retainer from a past acquisition deal gone sideways. Full access to internal financial data? One of them asked. Yes, I said. Start with vendor payouts over the last 9 months. Prioritize anything with Callan's name attached. And just like that, the war room was open. By Wednesday afternoon, I still hadn't heard from anyone. Not Lucian. Not Callan. Not even HR. But I wasn't surprised. It wasn't until that night that my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen since I left. Sarah. Text. I've been transferred. No warning. They moved me to support Callan's new task force. Same floor, new title, no explanation. My chest tightened, not in shock, but in grief. Sarah had been my only tether in that building, the last pair of eyes I trusted. Celeste knew that, and like a true strategist, she cut the line. I stared at the message, then typed back slowly. Thank you. I won't forget this. You stay safe. There was nothing else to say. I knew what they were doing. Isolate me, discredit me, replace everything I built with someone easier to control. But I wasn't scared anymore. That night, I uploaded every financial log I had pulled, company spending patterns, contract inconsistencies, payment trail anomalies, to a private server under my name. I encrypted every folder, duplicated every key file, and created a version map of evidence that could trace each dollar to a name. Then I made a call to a number I hadn't dialed in 5 years. It rang once. Miss Mireille, a familiar voice answered. Hello, Mason, I said. Do you still manage the trust account my mother set up before she passed? I do, he replied carefully. Would you like to review your access level? Yes, and confirm one thing for me. I leaned forward. Do I still hold primary control? He paused just briefly. You do, he said. Nothing has changed. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Good, I said. Time to start taking things back. The next morning, I logged into Wallace Manufacturing's internal financial dashboard, not as an executive, but as the trust's primary investor. My cursor hovered over a simple button on the screen. It didn't make a sound, didn't flash, just sat there, waiting. Pause disbursements. I clicked pause disbursements and closed the dashboard. No drama, no announcement, just a quiet shutdown of everything they took for granted. The fallout started 4 days later. Monday morning, I was sipping tea at my kitchen counter when the messages started pouring in. Not to me, of course, but across the company's internal comms. Screenshots made their way to Sarah, and Sarah made sure I saw them. Payroll hadn't landed. Direct deposits had failed across every department. Factory workers, engineers, senior managers. Not one paycheck cleared. By noon, vendor lines were jammed. Calls flooded into Wallace Manufacturing from every logistics firm, supply vendor, and consulting partner, asking the same thing. Where's our money? Callan scheduled an emergency board call, and from what I heard, barely held it together. It's probably a glitch, he said. Just some wire issue with accounting. Lucian wasn't having it. He stormed into Gareth Lowell's office. Gareth, the CFO, who once called me too analytical to lead. Apparently, Gareth's hands were shaking when he opened the financial dashboard. The trust funds didn't move, he told them. Every auto payment failed. The entire operating account is frozen. Lucian lost it. How does that even happen? That trust was supposed to fund our quarter. It was, Gareth said. But the clause, the primary controller has the right to suspend in the event of suspected mismanagement. Who's the controller? Lucian barked. Is it a hedge fund? A buyer? Give me a name. Gareth slid a printed clause across the table. Confidential ownership per estate setup, not traceable by board or family. You signed off on this years ago. That's when Celeste spoke. It's Avon. She didn't ask. She stated it. Lucian dismissed it, of course. She wouldn't dare. Celeste just stood there, silent. But I knew her silence. She wasn't surprised. She was exposed. That afternoon, a courier envelope arrived at my condo. Hand-delivered. No return address, but I recognized the watermark immediately. My mother's estate attorney. Inside was a letter. Any direct interference with Wallace manufacturing operations or cash flow may be deemed fiduciary sabotage under family estate law. We advise you to cease all activity and avoid further escalation. No emotion, no threats. Just an expensive way of saying, back off. I sat on my couch, letter in hand, and for the first time in this entire saga, I laughed. Not out of bitterness, not even satisfaction. It was the calm clarity of someone who finally held the bigger chessboard. I pulled up my email and forwarded the letter to the trust's legal team. Subject line, response needed. Prepare countersuit language if necessary. That evening, I updated my private spreadsheet, the one tracking real-time losses. $8.4 million in unpaid salaries, stalled projects, vendor defaults, frozen initiatives. And that was just week 1. I closed the file, leaned back in my chair, and let the stillness of the moment stretch. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. They wanted silence? Fine. But now my silence was the loudest threat they'd ever heard. I whispered into the dark, and we've only just started. I didn't rush. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and for the first time in weeks, I stepped out with no hesitation. The marble under my heels felt familiar, but this time, it didn't carry the weight of expectation. It echoed something sharper. Resolve. The boardroom door was closed, but I could hear Lucian pacing inside. The muffled sound of chairs scraping, Callan's nervous voice, Gareth whispering, trying to explain. Chaos ensues. I opened the door. 12 heads turned at once. Silence followed like a curtain drop. Even the air seemed to pull back. I walked in wearing black. No laptop, no assistant. Just a slim leather folder tucked under my arm. My presence alone stopped every murmur, every side glance. I didn't take my old seat, the one they always placed third from the head, like a reminder that I wasn't quite there. I walked to the far end of the table and sat directly across from Lucian. Across from power. His jaw tightened. Callan blinked, visibly shaken. Celeste didn't flinch. She watched me with that polished calm she wore like perfume. Lucian cleared his throat, desperate to reclaim ground. This emergency meeting is to address the recent acts of financial interference, he began. We believe there has been a hostile attempt to disrupt company liquidity. I cut in, not loudly, just firmly. There was no hostile attempt. I froze the accounts. A beat of dead silence. I hold 52% of Wallace Manufacturing's operating funds, I said, looking at each board member. Through the family trust, every dollar you spent, every salary you paid, every contract you approved, was backed by Capital E Control. Tamsin, the general counsel, leaned forward. That's legally accurate? I placed the folder on the table, opened it, began laying out papers one by one. These are payment authorizations approved under Callan's signature, I said. Vendor agreements to non-existent service providers. Consulting fees paid to shell companies in offshore jurisdictions. This one, I tapped a document, was registered under the name of Callan's former roommate. Gareth reached for the page, his hands trembling. And this one, I continued, shows Lucian's counter-signature. Whether through ignorance or complicity, these approvals enabled internal fraud totaling nearly $10 million. Gasps, whispers. Lucian's face turned a shade I'd never seen before. Ashen, drained of that usual superiority. Celeste sat stone still. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Just forward, cold and blank. Callan broke the silence. This is payback, he snapped. You're doing this because you couldn't handle being passed over. I looked at him, not angry, not even disappointed. Just done. No, I said. This is accountability. You weren't passed the torch. You stole it, then lit the house on fire. Tamsin stood. If these documents are verified, and I believe they are, we're legally required to open a full investigation. Lucian tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I recommend, Tamsin said, steady and clear, the immediate suspension of both Lucian and Callan Morel, pending legal review. Effective immediately. She looked around the table. One by one, the board members nodded. No one defended them, not this time. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I stood slowly and collected the folder. I didn't come here to win, I said, locking eyes with no one and everyone. I came to reclaim what was always mine. The text came at 7:14 a.m. Lunch? Just us. No lawyers, no drama. Celeste never added pleasantries, no emojis, no punctuation beyond what was necessary to keep things clean, deliberate. Even in casual outreach, she treated language like a scalpel. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Not because I was considering saying no, but because I wanted to know what it felt like. To see her name, one last time, without flinching. I typed one word back. Okay. We met at a restaurant on the edge of downtown Charlotte. Sleek, expensive, forgettable. The kind of place that existed to host quiet betrayals over polished silverware. It was the same place we used to go when I was a teenager, after board meetings, where I was told to sit quietly and learn. I arrived 3 minutes early. She was already seated. Of course. Celeste was in navy blue, structured shoulders, minimal jewelry, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I recognized that expression. It was the one she used with donors and corporate partners, the one that suggested diplomacy while issuing a warning. Avon, she said gently. I nodded, sliding into the booth across from her. The silence lingered as the waiter poured water and disappeared without another word. You've made your point, she began softly. You're brilliant. You're fierce. You've always been that way. I didn't respond. I let her talk. But you're also burning bridges no one can rebuild. Her voice stayed even, but her fingers tightened around the base of her glass. There's still time to come back from this, to fix the family. I watched her, unmoved. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. You care about this family, don't you? About your legacy? We only did what was best, for the business, for your future. There it was, the line she'd used for years. The same script, the same manipulation, dressed up in concern. I took a slow breath. No, I said quietly. You did what was best to keep me beneath you. She blinked, just once. You were never going to let me lead, not because I wasn't capable, but because I reminded you of what you never dared to be. Celeste sat back, folding her hands, that mask of control starting to crack. You think I enjoyed any of this? She asked. Do you know what it took to keep this family, this company, afloat? I know exactly what it took, I said, because I was the one holding it together while you pretended to be protecting it. The server brought salads we didn't touch. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a single-page document, formally severing all legal connection to the family trust, aside from the controlling interest I legally retained. I don't know. The CEO's office had always felt like a stage set to me. Glass walls, polished wood, silent expectations. I never imagined myself sitting behind that desk. Not because I didn't believe I could, but because I was raised to believe I shouldn't. But now, the door bore my name. When I walked in that morning, the first thing I noticed was how quiet everything felt. Not empty, just still. Like the building had taken a deep breath and was finally exhaling. The company hadn't crumbled after the storm. It was healing. Sarah had returned the previous week. She didn't hug me when she walked in. She just nodded, eyes misted, and got back to work like she'd never left. Vendors who once threatened to sever ties were now calling to extend new contracts. Operations were steady. Payroll was consistent. The tension that once lived in the corners of every hallway was gone. Gareth stopped by mid-morning, holding a printed report. "Quarters up," he said. "Investors are calling this a full recovery." I scanned the numbers. Real progress, no shortcuts. He hesitated for a second, then added, "This company doesn't fear leadership anymore. They believe in it now." I gave him a quiet nod. That was enough. As for the rest, Callan was indicted 2 weeks ago. Wire fraud, corporate theft. The evidence I turned over left little room for debate. His name hadn't come up again since. I didn't attend the hearings. I didn't need to see him answer for it. I already had. Lucian, they stripped him of his title. The board voted to assign him the honorary founder label, which came with no authority and a tiny office on the lowest executive floor. I heard he tried calling me once. I let it ring. Celeste disappeared from the narrative entirely. No messages, no meetings, no statements. Just silence. And honestly, that was the kindest ending we were ever going to get. I didn't reach out. There was nothing left to retrieve. A week into the new quarter, I sent a company-wide message to every employee. Subject line, "You were never invisible to me." In the email, I wrote, "This company was never just theirs. It was always ours. The late nights, the saved accounts, the hard questions in the rooms no one dared speak in. I saw you, and from now on, I'll make sure you're seen." I didn't expect replies, but they came, hundreds. Not corporate praise, not polished language, just raw honesty. One note from a factory supervisor read, "We didn't walk out on the company, we walked out on them. We came back for you." I kept that one taped inside my desk drawer. That evening, I stood by the window of my office. The sun was setting over Charlotte, warm and golden, casting long reflections across the floor. I thought about everything they'd called me. Not leadership material. A complication. A mistake. But I thought more about what I'd become. The stabilizer. The survivor. The storm and the shelter. Maybe they'd never say they were sorry. Maybe they never even believed they were wrong. And maybe that was okay, because I was never their mistake. I was their proof they had underestimated the wrong daughter. Some people are born into love, others are born into expectations. And some of us? We're born into silence and spend years unlearning the lie that we have to earn our worth. If you're watching this and you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or made to feel like you were never enough, I need you to hear this. You are not their mistake. You are not the label they gave you in their worst moment. You are not defined by the seat they refuse to offer you at the table. Sometimes the very hands they try to silence are the same hands that held everything together. I had to lose everything I thought I needed, from my family's approval to their version of success, to finally choose myself. And let me tell you, peace doesn't always come wrapped in applause. Sometimes it walks in after you've stopped waiting for a thank you. So if you're facing something hard right now, a family that won't hear you, a workplace that devalues you, a truth you've buried too long, let this be your reminder. You are not invisible, not to me, and you won't be to the people who truly matter in your life. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to walk away from something you once fought to belong to? What did that cost you, and what did it give you back? Let's open up this conversation in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this video touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me what city you're watching from. And if it didn't connect with you, I'd still love to know why. Your honesty helps make this space better. Wherever you're watching from, you matter here. And if this story made you feel seen, even a little, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Let's keep growing, learning, and rising together. See you in the next story.